world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Monday, March 16th. Recording this a little later than I would intend to, but things are what they are. We got to get into it. We got a lot to talk about, and a lot of today's episode is going to be focused on one event. Now, there was a meeting in the Oval Office today, and that was on I believe it was supposed to be for the Kennedy Center. And Donald Trump had a lot of gaffes in this one meeting. And we're going to talk about several of them. And that's probably going to cover the bulk of this episode. However, I'm going to start off by talking about a couple things. One, we are in the middle of primary season. Now, tomorrow, Tuesday, which is also St. Patrick's Day, is primary season in Illinois. Okay. And as I say with all the primaries, fight like hell for the candidate you want in the primary. If that candidate does not win, then go with whoever won in the general. We can fight like hell to get our candidates across that finish line up until the point when it comes down to a choice between somebody that is pro Donald Trump, pro regime, pro ICE, pro everything we don't like right now, and somebody who is against all of it. Now, we have other problems. We have AIPAC, which is, let me look up the actual AIPAC refers to, no, that is not it. That's why I'm spelling it wrong. AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It has a large contribution. They've contributed $28 million to congressional campaigns. Has faced criticism for its funding practices, with some candidates opposing its influence. And there's a lot of people who say people that take money from AIPAC are supporting things that are very pro-Israel, regardless of whether or not they are pro-United States. So if AIPAC is something you are very concerned about and you want to push against it, and you want to go ahead and, vote for a candidate who didn't take AIPAC money, do that in the primary. And then when we get to the general in November, if it's Democrats versus Republicans, people who are pro-fascism, pro-regime, pro-Donald Trump, pro-war in Iran, all of those things, even if they take AIPAC money, you're going to have to side with the Democrat. It may be a hard pill to swallow, but we're going to have to do that. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, speaking of primaries, is here in Iowa. There was there were two candidates for the governor nomination for the Democrats here. And I believe I'm trying to get her name, the other candidate who I wasn't as familiar with. Let's see. But one of the two candidates, Rob Sand, is the other one. He is the one I have been backing, and I think he has got the best chance of winning here in Iowa. But I come to find out his challenger, she dropped out. So it is down to just Rob Sand here in Iowa, which is good news for the Democrats. Now, somebody else may pop up. I don't know if there's enough time left here before the Iowa primary, which is in June. I don't know what the filing deadline is to get your name on the ballot, but she did not get enough signatures required in order to be on the ballot. So she has dropped out and ended her race, which is a good thing for Rob Sand. I think he has got a good chance of flipping Iowa blue. Now, getting into politics here and this big event at the White House. First of all, Donald Trump holds this event and he embarrasses himself throughout the whole thing. It was, I want to say, a couple of hours long, and all he did was embarrass himself. First of all, he could not remember who he nominated, or not even nominated, I should say, or even appointed. He could not remember who is running Venezuela. Now, just little over 2 months ago, the United States launches a military incursion into Venezuela, goes in on some potentially trumped up charges. We will see how that plays out in the court system to get Maduro, the rightfully elected president of Venezuela. We capture him, put him into U.S. custody. And the person who is now leading Venezuela is Darcy Rodriguez, and she was Maduro's VP. It wasn't even a regime change. Everybody else in the administration is still there. They didn't succeed at doing anything. But Donald Trump couldn't remember. He was talking about it, and he said he was talking to the president of Venezuela, and he was doing such a great job, and he was doing an amazing job. Now, misgendering the president of Venezuela, you know, for Republicans isn't the end of the world because they don't believe in using proper pronouns. And if you mention pronouns, they get all freaked out anyway. But the simple fact is, Donald Trump couldn't remember that it is now a woman in charge of Venezuela. And he is responsible for her being in charge. And then he goes on and he talks about I don't know at what point, I'm probably going to get these out of order because I've seen a lot of it in news articles and in clips. I will admit I did not watch this live. I was not able to catch it live. And to be honest, anything longer than a 2 or a 3 minute TikTok clip of Donald Trump speaking, and I start to get a migraine because it is that stupid and I feel like I lose brain cells. So I prefer to read what Donald Trump says through articles and things like that because it's at least a little it's harder to understand sometimes, but you can kind of skip through it and try to figure out what he was saying that way. It's a little easier. But he goes on to say that he would have the honor of being the one to take over Cuba. That he would have the honor of claiming Cuba. I'm going to see if I can get the exact quote here. Here it is from the president was participating in an executive order signing ceremony Monday. Okay, so apparently there was multiple events Monday. He was asked about Cuba by a reporter. Trump responded he could take the entire island and he added that he would likely have the honor of doing so in some form. Here's the quote: "I do believe I will have the honor of taking Cuba. That would be good. That's a big honor." Peter Doocy said, "Taking Cuba?" as a question. And President said, "Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it or take it, I think I can do anything I want with it, to tell you the truth." This isn't the first time he is talked about Cuba. They've talked about Cuba multiple times over the years. Or at least Donald Trump has, at least this administration, I should say. But Donald Trump doesn't know what's going on with Cuba. He acts like Cuba's some big threat, and I think part of that is the dementia, like I talked about on TikTok. He's remembering things probably from the 60s and the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't know if he has Alzheimer's, dementia, maybe a combination of both, because they are not the same thing. And if he is, depending on what year he's living in, he might be remembering when Fidel Castro was in charge of Cuba. And Fidel's been gone for a long time. In fact, I'm not even sure who is running Cuba right now. Let's see if I can. Let's see if it'll pull up. Waiting on the laptop. But either way, last I knew it was Raul Castro. Well, it finally came through. It is Miguel Diaz Canel. So it's not even the Castros anymore. And over the last several years, I think toward the end of the Obama administration was when we started to fix that relationship, at least a little bit, with Cuba. They weren't seen as the same threat level as they were before, and some of the sanctions, while still extreme, had been lessened to some extent. And I think Donald Trump is not in his right mind right now because he is suffering from dementia. But Donald Trump is suffering from dementia. I firmly believe it. And he doesn't understand that Cuba is not the same Cuba that they dealt with in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. The Castros aren't in power anymore. He's probably thinking it's still like the days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And what was it? The 4 days in November. What would it have been? 1963, I believe, when we came as close to an armed standoff with Russia as we had ever done, by standing up to Russia and saying, "No, we're not going to let you put missiles on Cuba because it's too close to American soil, and you'd be able to strike America from there." So uh, we do that, right? Donald, we did that in the 60s. We stopped them. There was the failed Bay of Pigs, where it was an invasion setup that was supposed to have been with the backing of the U.S. military. It was a bunch of Cuban refugees who were going to go take Cuba back, but the help from the United States never actually came, and it was a major flop. And I think that's part of what Donald Trump remembers. He's still in those times in his head, and he's talking about wanting to take Cuba and how it would be a great honor. Well, why does he want to take Cuba? Because he's worried about legacy. Donald Trump, I believe, is very much aware of how much time he has left, and it's not long. He's not long for this world. Now, he talks about having the honor of taking Cuba. He's talked before about Greenland, and they've talked him out of Greenland. He's talked about Canada. He's talked about Mexico, and he wants to do it. So he goes down in the history books as the president who added territory to the United States or as the one who did it. He's worried about history, the legacy for him. And he should be worried because he's going to go down as one of the worst presidents in American history, if not the worst president in American history. His name is going to be synonymous with problems, you know, and that all of the issues we have had. We're not going to discuss him being president outside of a historical context, saying, "Yeah, he was president during this time to this time, etc." But that's who he is, right? That's how he um, deals with things. He worries about being remembered. That's why he wants to build the ballroom. That's why he wants to build the Arc de Triomphe. That's why he is he talks about, well, I have had more success in Iran than anybody has had in 40 plus years, or whatever. He's like, I'm doing it. Nobody else would do it. I'm doing it. They're gonna remember me. That's why when I was talking to Will on his live the other day, Will brought up something that was kind of scary. Will mentioned, he goes, is it possible that Donald Trump would drop a nuke because of wanting to be the guy who did it? And that's possible. It is within the realm of possibility. Now, hopefully, the safeguards we have in place to prevent that from ever happening would actually be in place. But, um, you know, would it surprise me if he tried it? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But he wants, you know, he's worried so much about his legacy and everything that it is uh, ridiculous at this point. Now, uh, he talks about Cuba. What are they going to gain by going after Cuba beyond territory? I have no idea. I mean, Cuba doesn't have much of an economy. If we were to bring them into the United States, we would actually have to probably spend a lot of money to modernize Cuba. Um, Now, it is a new market, obviously. If they were open Cuba up to American businesses, and I don't know how receptive Cuba itself would be to any of this. Um, it it could just be a fool's errand on the part of Donald Trump. That part wouldn't surprise me either. But that's where his brain is. Now, beyond that, so he couldn't remember who he put in Venezuela. He couldn't he doesn't remember that things have gotten slightly better with Cuba as far as relations, and we've eased some restrictions. He's put more sanctions and more restrictions. It sounds like they've barely got any drinkable water, uh, and hardly any electricity. Like, he is actively committing international war crimes. And as I talked about, I think it was on yesterday's podcast, maybe something the Democrats should look into doing is going in and actually recognizing the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And one of the reasons we don't recognize it is because of sovereignty. We're worried that, well, if they throw a charge out against, say, a sitting president like Donald Trump, that it would affect how we do, our business. Or if they charge American servicemen and women for things that happen when they're in a combat zone, uh, that it steps on the toes of the UCMJ, the Universal Code of Military Justice, those kind of things. So maybe the Democrats do need to look into joining the ICC officially as part of the United States, saying, okay, we're going to join it. We're going to, recognize any international charges you bring against any of our citizens, etc. Maybe we need to do that. Now, uh, as part of this, when he was talking about Iran, now he said a couple dumb things when it comes to Iran. First of all, he said that he talked to a former president and that they wished they would have had the guts to do what Donald Trump did and go after Iran. Now, Donald Trump is more than likely lying. He wouldn't say who, and he had to throw a dig out there because that's what Donald Trump does. He's like, well, their career is over. They don't have much of a career left, but they said they wish they would have done it, but I can't say who because it would ruin their career, but they don't have a career left. There's only four presidents, four living U.S. presidents besides Donald Trump. You have Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. And so far, none of, it sounds like all of their representatives have come out and said that conversation never happened. So is Donald Trump lying to the American people again because he lies a lot? Or did this conversation happen all in his brain and is he having some kind of a mental lapse? Either one is actually possible, and both are scary when it comes to this is the man running the country. Now, I was sitting on the Rational Boomers Substack live before recording this. And throughout there, I said, when Donald Trump's gone, we need to put some more safeguards in place to prevent a dementia patient from becoming president. And I believe that. I think that's what we need to do. As a whole, I think the country needs another constitutional amendment, probably two. Should pass the Equal Rights Amendment that has been attempted to have been passed since the 70s. And they need to pass that Equal Rights Amendment, get it put on the books, as well as put one in there that would put an upper cap, and I think for an upper age cap for all elected officials. And yes, there is something to be said about having an older person in certain positions, people who have been there for a while because they know things, they know how the game is played. One of the reasons Barack Obama picked Joe Biden as his VP all the way back in 2008 is because Joe Biden had been a senator for so long. He had connections in politics. He could use those connections to work across the aisle to get things done. And he could actually make some accomplishments. And he only got those connections and was able to do those kind of things because of his tenure. But because we don't have upper limits, because we don't have age limits and those kind of things, that's how we end up with things like Chuck Grassley. So yeah, that's how we get people like Chuck Grassley. 92 years old, he's still in the U.S. Senate and he wants to run again for re-election in 2028. At least last we heard. I mean, that's ridiculous. And he's not the only one. You got Mitch McConnell being wheeled around the Capitol building at this point in a wheelchair. Doesn't seem like he is very much with it at this point. Just trying to serve out his time. And it's not just a Republican problem, it's a Democrat problem. You have or had Dianne Feinstein in 2024, senator from California, and she was a great senator. Problem was, she should have retired well before she died in office. And we find out around the time she died that her daughter had actually gone to court and gotten power of attorney to control Senator Feinstein's money because couldn't handle her own bank account, couldn't handle her own finances because she was not mentally capable at that point. She was in her late 80s, maybe early 90s. Let's see. Not that it matters, but I like being correct. I think she was 89. Nope, she was 90 when she passed. 90. And Uh, you know, great senator. I'm not complaining about her job as a senator, except for the fact that she was in such poor health by the end that she shouldn't have been a senator. You're telling me we couldn't have gotten another Democratic senator from California, of all places? Of course we could have. We need to go through and put in some changes in place after Donald Trump is gone to make sure things like this don't happen. Now, uh, they were talking at this event, and Donald Trump was talking with Mike Johnson, and he basically comes out and he outs a member of the uh, House of Representatives, somebody we had been uh, talking about. And that was uh, Neil Dunn, representative from Florida, Republican. Representative Dunn had been talking about, he's resigning at the end of his term. He is not continuing on, and he had been talking about uh, possibly retiring, and he was kind of pressured into staying because of the Republican majority being so narrow and so thin, and they were worried about being able to, uh, keep control of the House of Representatives ahead of the midterms. It's going to be bad enough for them if they lose the House of Representatives in the midterms. And I'm just going to read this from MSN. Trump initially referred to an unnamed lawmaker who had been very ill and wasn't going to make it before asking Johnson whether to disclose the congressman's identity. The Louisiana Republican then identified Neil Dunn, saying he faced real health challenges and a pretty grim diagnosis, but continued to work and to continue to vote. When Trump pressed for specifics, Johnson said, I think it was a terminal diagnosis, before Trump added he would be dead by June. Johnson responded quickly, that wasn't public, adding the outlook had been grim. And then he said the issue involved a heart problem, and Johnson recounted how he had told Trump about Dunn's condition. Johnson said Trump later called Dunn to encourage him and to thank him. According to Johnson, White House and military physicians evaluated Dunn within hours and took him to Walter Reed for emergency surgery. Johnson said the man has a new lease on life. He acts like he's 30 years younger. We thought we'd seen a ghost. Trump later returned to the episode saying Dunn had personally told him he was terminal with a really bad heart, and doctors had said there was nothing they could do. Trump said he was troubled by the diagnosis, both personally and politically. It was bad because I liked him. Number two, it was bad because I need his vote. And see, there it is. Donald Trump, yeah, he says he likes him, but he added the other half. He needed his vote because Congress is such a thin majority. They couldn't even let him go home to potentially face this on his own or to pass away. They had to push him to stay, and now it sounds like they have got him treated for this condition. Trump said he contacted White House doctors, calling them miracle workers. Said Dunn was on the operating table like 2 hours later. He said doctors told him they believed Dunn would recover. That Dunn would recover. Trump closed by saying he intervened for him first and for the vote second, but it was a close second, actually. Yeah, that's who Donald Trump is. Um, See, Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump first and foremost. He's got very much a what can you do for me right now mentality. That's who he is, that's what he cares about. In the case of Representative Dunn, it is because Republicans have a 218 seat majority in the House of Representatives. They technically only have 217, but that is because there is a Republican, Kevin Kilney from California, who is now an independent, but caucuses with the uh, um, with the Republicans, bringing them up to 218. Now, there are multiple elections coming up that could determine the fate of the House of Representatives. You have April 7th, you have the runoff in the state of Georgia. You have them dealing with that. Okay. There is a runoff. It is going to be between Harris, is it Sean Harris and Clayton Fuller? Because nobody got over 50% of the vote in the primary, or in the not the primary, in the special election to fill Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat. So now there's a runoff, and that could be a flip. There's a seat out in California that doesn't happen until I think that seat gets filled in August, and you have Mickey Sherrill's seat in New Jersey. That one is a safe Democratic seat. They're worried about flipping seats, so they went and they saved Neil Dunn. They apparently Donald Trump called in some favors, maybe got him access to which, and he should have already had access to that kind of health care, but apparently they got him treatment of some kind. But the way they are talking about it is they make it sound like it's a heart transplant. Because if it was a terminal heart diagnosis and then they were able to get him better in a matter of a couple of hours, sounds to me like a recipe for a heart transplant. Just saying. And if they did that for a sitting congressman, that's amazing that they were able to pull it off in a matter of a couple hours. Now, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just a valve or something like that. Maybe it was just drastically clogged arteries and they were able to do stints and bypasses or clean them out or whatever they needed to do there. We don't know because they're not saying. But see, Donald Trump doesn't have a filter. That was something that shouldn't have probably been shared with anybody. And Donald Trump's just out here telling the world. And I wondered, and I posed this question over on the Rational Boomer Substack Live. Now, if you've caught the Rational Boomer lives on Substack, they are not like what he does on TikTok. They are not the multi-guest big panel lives. They are a lot more controlled. It is just him answering questions from the audience. Occasionally, he can bring up one guest, but they got to be there for the entirety of the live. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Now, they went ahead and he comes out and I was talking on Mike's live anyway, and I said threw in the comments, I'm like, I wonder, and this was before I had read the rest of this other article where they went in more detail. The article I read was, and the clip I had seen was just him revealing the reveal about Neil Dunn and how uncivilized, etc. it was. Well, I put the question out there that whether or not Donald Trump was projecting on this case, right? Could he have actually been thinking about his own mortality? And is he facing a potential June timeline? Was Neil Dunn actually that serious? Was he actually terminal? Maybe he was, and by the reaction of Mike Johnson in the room, it seems like he was. But could it be possible that Donald Trump was reacting to his own mortality and he was projecting it out onto somebody else? I mean, it is entirely possible that Donald Trump was projecting his own health issues into Neil Dunn. Donald Trump is not in good health. We've talked about it a lot. He has dementia, Alzheimer's, something like that. The amount of times it was prevalent just in the clips I saw today, earlier today. I was going to say yesterday for some reason, but the day's gotten away from me, and it my days blur together so bad it's not funny. I half the time I'm not even sure what day it is. If I didn't have a calendar in front of me, I'd be questioning which day I was recording for. I mean, he's got dementia, he's got Alzheimer's. Um, he's got the swollen ankles, which a lot of people think has to do with him retaining water, could be fluid buildup, could be chronic heart failure, any number of problems. A lot of times anymore, he is very short of breath. Seems like he is struggling. He hasn't golfed in I don't know how long. He has been photographed at a golf course, um, but uh, he hasn't actually been photographed golfing. I mean, one of the last times, about the only thing he was photographed with a golf club in his hand. One of the last times he was photographed at a golf course, but it was because he was leaning on the club almost like a cane. Um, Now, Donald Trump would never get photographed with a cane at all. Um, that's just not who he is, right? Uh, Donald Trump wants to project this air of fitfulness, etc., and his health, all of these things. And when it comes to it, he wants you to believe that he is, in the shape he was 20 years ago. He's not. It's very evident. He sits more at these meetings. He doesn't stand and deliver remarks. When he does, he is gripping that podium for dear life. A lot of times, it looks like he's about to fall over. His lean is getting more pronounced. Um, he's doing a lot of things when it comes to everything involving um, you know, his health. He doesn't want us uh knowing how bad his health is, right? But it's evident that there are problems when it comes to Donald Trump and his health. He's not doing well. And could he have projected how bad he is doing onto Neil Dunn? It is possible. Now, I don't think that Donald Trump had any sort of a heart transplant or major heart issues, um, or a major heart like related surgeries or anything like that. I think we would have been told, unless that 4 day period where he disappeared in, was it September, where he didn't post on Truth Social, things like that, unless that was him getting treatment then, and he is using something similar that is happening to somebody else to maybe talk about it. We don't know. When Donald Trump is gone, the Democrats should do investigations into his health, just as the Republicans tried to do into Joe Biden. Now they didn't get anywhere looking into Joe Biden and his health. That they kind of dropped it and dropped it quietly, but they decided that that was in their best interest, was to drop it and drop it quietly, right? Um, Democrats should go looking deep, especially if Donald Trump doesn't make it to the end of his term, which is very likely. I think Donald Trump doesn't see the end of his term. I think he ends up passing away probably before that, if he doesn't get thrown out on his ear by the Republicans in Congress because they think it is more beneficial to them. Now, it is entirely possible that the Republicans decide to move on from Donald Trump. and they decide that it is in their best interest to move on, and they could do that. But I think more likely Donald Trump just doesn't make it to the end of his term. And continuing with what we were talking about, as far as the dementia showing, there was one other thing he did in this interview, and CNN pointed it out within the span of about a half an hour. And I'm probably going to get it backward as to which way he said it, but he was talking about the Strait of Hormuz, and he was talking about um, getting it opened back up, and he basically called on all of our allies in NATO and other allies to come in and open it up for us, basically. Now, most of those countries have said, no, we're not doing it. But he asks our allies in this thing to come in and basically send their ships in to go clear the Strait of Hormuz. And then later on, he says, well, we don't need uh, our NATO allies. Now, as he was calling on NATO to come in and clear the Strait of Hormuz, he said basically, well, what have they ever done for us? Um, you know, big changes would be coming. If they don't do it, we'll probably leave NATO. He doesn't have the authority to leave NATO. Tucked into a 2024 defense authorization spending bill under the Biden administration, and it passed with bipartisan support because Republicans controlled the House of Representatives. They tucked a provision in there that required Congress to authorize the leaving of NATO. The president is not entirely accurate, or is not entirely able to leave NATO on his own. So he wouldn't have the authority to just generally leave NATO on his own. He probably thinks he does, but he doesn't, because under the Biden administration, lawmakers decided, and they saw the writing on the wall. I think they even passed it before the election, just to make sure that the next president couldn't just unilaterally leave NATO, because Donald Trump had threatened to do things like that. Um, you know, he would leave our allies out in the cold if you could let him, because he does not respect the NATO alliance. He does not respect our allies. It's all about, what have you done for me lately? And now in this thing, he wants them to send their own ships into the Strait of Hormuz, try and get them involved with Iran to open the strait back up. But that's the problem here, right? They don't have uh, the they don't have any skin in the game. Why would they do that? Why would they send their ships in? And for the most part, they have said, we're not doing that. We're not getting involved. You guys started this. You guys finish it. Now, there has been some talk and some chatter about Bibi Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, being dead. Don't know if it's true or not. It is still speculation at this point. However, from what I have read and what I have seen, the videos that they have used as proof of life um, haven't held up. Apparently, there are some very bizarre things about the videos they are showing. Okay. They're showing videos of him. I think there was one in a coffee house where it looked like he was either eating or drinking something, and it looked awkward. Um, and it was, uh, it just looked like AI garbage, right? You know how when you see somebody makes an AI video, they're all over TikTok and YouTube and other places, and it looks weird when they take a bite, like the food doesn't actually disappear off the fork, or like it goes through the side of their cheek or something like that. Um, that is uh, kind of what it looked like. And apparently, there were some problems with how he was putting his hands in his pockets as he was talking, and he had six fingers on one hand. which is all problems that AI has when it comes to generating and creating images. And I myself, I've used AI a little bit, not a lot. I'm not a huge fan. I've used it mostly for uh, a sounding board for some ideas I've had for varying things or asking it research style questions. Um, and usually where it has problems, what from what I've seen is generating images. Um, I used AI to generate the logo you see on all my pages. And I struggled to get it to get that much of the logo. Um, I'd have to tell it something and have it would try to recreate it, even though I wanted it like just to change the size of a font. Sometimes I had to be very, very precise in what I told it, or it tried to regenerate the image again, and it changed way too much. Everything with it is um, a problem there. And with AI being, if AI did create these videos, they're still pretty easy to uh, tell because AI is not perfect, not by a long shot. We are a ways away from them being able to create decent, you know, fakes and making them realistic, especially when you are dealing with something like uh, a real person, right? I've seen some great videos where it is AI generated, but it's in uh, not exactly cartoon animation, but when you're dealing with uh, fictional characters, you know, monsters, things like that, that are easier to distinguish. For whatever reason, AI has a problem rendering realistic looking people that look perfect, especially when it comes to uh, up close and things like that. Now, this isn't the first time that AI has been accused of being, or that people have accused AI of being involved in videos involving politics and things like that. There was apparently a video from one of Trump's events recently where the people in the background apparently were potentially AI generated because there was rows of people standing or sitting behind him, and that they were somebody also held their phone up, like you do, and was recording, and the crowd behind him wasn't there. So could AI have been there? Possibly. Was it just an image glitch where you're recording one, you got a camera behind the person recording with their phone and you just didn't see the image right on their phone? That's entirely possible as well. So we don't know what's going on with Bibi Netanyahu. I don't know if for sure. I don't know definitively if those videos were AI generated or not. But if it is true that Bibi is gone, that is a major blow to Israel. Now it looks like they would have to hold a not an actual election, but a vote within the parliament, I think is what they have. I'm not sure what their actual term for it is, but effectively it's like a parliament. And from what I understand, from what I've read, which is very little, to be honest, it's hard enough keeping track of American politics, let alone every other country's politics. Um, but if they go ahead and um, they would have to vote on a new prime minister, effectively, similar to how Canada does it. Now, that does not mean they would have a whole new election and voting in an entirely new government, but that they would just select a new prime minister. Now, it sounds like the person uh, is uh, that is next in line could be worse than Bibi Netanyahu. Not sure because I don't know enough about that person. So we will have to see. One of the things I have speculated on is that the person involved, or whoever takes over for Netanyahu, could be trying to come up with a way to deal with Donald Trump, because Bibi's got a way of getting Donald Trump to do exactly what he wants. So we are going to be watching what happens with all of that. If Netanyahu is actually gone, we will have to see what they do to replace him. Um, and for right now, they could be trying to get through with and get by with as much as they can in his name before people realize he is actually gone. I have speculated that if Donald Trump actually goes, that they may try to push some things through similarly with Donald Trump being gone, just to make sure that they get their way, because that way JD Vance would be protected. One of the things I have been thinking about with that is that what they might do is, if Donald Trump doesn't make it, right, and he doesn't make it on Wednesday morning, that they may go through, use the auto pen, sign a bunch of pardons, do things like that real quick, and then not tell us everything about it until after, or not even tell us that he is gone until like 2 days later. Just say, well, something happened Tuesday, or Thursday. Say he didn't wake up or whatever, that he wasn't feeling well Tuesday and Wednesday, and then didn't wake up on Thursday, and maybe push the clock back a little bit on Donald Trump's timeline. Now, if they do that and it does come to light, and it probably would, because this administration is leaky as hell, I think anybody involved should be held responsible. Now, if something were to happen and Donald Trump were to pass, of course, I want to go over and I want to clarify this one last time, or maybe not even the last time, just one more time rather, and I'm going to do it every time we talk about Donald Trump passing. If something were to happen and Donald Trump were to pass, JD Vance would become president. He would then get to select his own VP. Congress would have to approve that VP pick, but it would not automatically be Mike Johnson. It would not automatically be Mike Johnson. That would just have to be the person that JD Vance picked to end up being his VP candidate. But it could be anybody. It could be Brian Kemp out of Georgia. It could be Chris Christie. It could be Kristi Noem. I don't think it would be, but it could be. It could be literally anybody. They just have to get congressional approval. And then after that, they would go ahead and be uh, the vice president. They would take the oath of office and become VP. Now, JD Vance, the minute that something happens to Donald Trump, he would take the oath of office. Once he did, he would be uh, fully the president of the United States. From the minute something happened to Donald, he could be acting president and he would have the full authority to do a lot. Um, but he wouldn't be the actual sitting president until he took the oath of office. And if they do any shenanigans behind the scenes, um, you know, that could happen. I don't know. I don't know that they're going to do that, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did, because that just seems like something this administration, these Republicans, would try. Anyway, that is what could happen down the road. Don't know what's going to happen with Donald Trump. Don't know if he was projecting for that June timeline. We'll have to see. Um, don't know what's going to go on in the war with Iran. Not really having any luck getting any allies going through. And we'll see what tomorrow brings, because as I say, there's always stuff to talk about with this administration, and there's probably going to be more surprising bullshit tomorrow for us to go over. So I'm going to wrap up the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. Hope you guys have a great day, and we will talk again tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.